my own rules, play my own games. I don't give a what you
Hi, I'm Ray,
And I'm Steph,
and this is the SciComm Hotline.
where we gossip about all the cringe and exciting ways science is communicated in real life.
So let's bring the drama.
wild and free.
Hi,
Hi,
Ray.
Stephanie. I love your hat.
Thanks. I'm hiding the fact that I didn't wash my hair.
I feel like sometimes it helps, like that little bit of like the oily and everything. It's kind of like, I mean, what I'm seeing is a beautiful shine.
Oh,
So,
well, a shine that you only see because I'm wearing a bucket hat. And so it's only just like the very bottom, but then it's like also hiding like the uncurled rattiness that
love
from
it.
not brushing my hair
Love the
for the
chaos.
past couple days. So we got some very juicy drama. We're gonna start off right off the bat. Okay, so for the sake of this story, this person submitted through a voice memo, but it was a little bit too juicy that we had to anonymize it. Anonymize it as much as I can. So what I'm reading is essentially kind of like a paraphrased version of this submitter's voice memo. And I also try to anonymize it and make it as not super specific. So we're not like targeting whatever this person, the submitter, is complaining about.
Yeah.
I guess not complaining, but I guess when we ask for submissions, we want like the hot takes or we want like the gut reactions of experiencing something, and then we can like discuss it, go into the nuances. And as Ray loves to say, how do we complicate the narrative? So, Ray, are you ready to hear?
I cannot wait.
Okay. So, again, I'm reading this as if like this person emailed it, even though they sent a voice memo. So,
Do it. Do it.
okay. So, a popular science content creator was nominated for a popular internet award.
Mhm.
This creator provides a link in their story where you can vote for them. I see the story and want to support, so I click on the link to vote. But upon landing on the award website, there are two things that I noticed immediately. One, it's not for the science communication work that they're being nominated for. Their nomination has been put together as a campaign and package as its creator's personal struggle. The second thing that I noticed is that this creator was nominated by a public relations firm. So that's why I was like, wait, hold up. You've hired a PR firm for starters, and they have packaged your personal struggle in an award winning package and paid to submit them into this internet award. And when you're hiring your PR firm to submit multiple awards, this means that this creator has spent thousands of dollars to package their personal struggle for this award. This is super weird to me because this was submitted into the science category. It's not to say that scientists and science communicators can't contain multitudes and aren't multidimensional people, but I experienced whiplash because I thought I was voting for their science work and not their personal struggle. So, this poses the question. In order to be a successful science content creator in 2025, does that mean we have to package your personal stories for monetary gain? And by success, I mean millions of followers and making money off of that.
Oh boy. Okay, so a few context question. Do they know each other personally, do you think?
I don't think they know each other personally. I think
Okay.
we're all in the same space. Like
Right.
we all live on the internet. When we have like, at least for you and I, we we see the same common content creators kind of in our feed because we're in this ecosystem. And then you can see which STEM content creators grow very large followings.
Right, right.
When they get awards, when they get hyped up, I feel like even you and I, we don't personally know this person, but we're in the same ecosystem because we still see it
Right,
and
right,
experience.
right. And has this other person, this social media person, um, been creating a lot of science content, or is it mostly personal level content?
So that's the thing. I think they started off as not necessarily doing a lot of like science content, but being like a representative of a scientist in this space.
Right.
Like this person as like, okay, so like again, Ray and I are trying to be like protective, but also like this is going to add a little bit more to like the nuanced discussion in terms of this creator that submitted this award is a woman in STEM. So they are not necessarily creating content about like science. Maybe they do. It's like occasionally, but they mostly their platform is built on being like a woman in STEM.
Mhm. Right, right,
And
right.
so when this creator is submitting in the science category because they are a scientist as their career, but they also are their science communication content is mostly in the sense of like representation as a woman in this career and what does that look like? And then again, yeah, how do they package their themselves as a woman in STEM? I think is what like adds to kind of like this finer nuance.
Right, right. And I wonder some of it is also that it's on social media. Like, if this person had a broadcast TV thing and they would have like gotten nominated for like a broadcast award and they would have spent that money on everything, I feel like it would have come off a little different than in social media because like social media's buzzword is authenticity, right?
Mhm,
So you feel
mhm.
like this is a person is just like a normal person like me and you. They talk about something and then something happens. But when you go behind the scene, a lot of times, like actually, like they're probably not the only person that has like PR behind them. Like I think there are a lot of people that are using not like a lot, but there are like a good number of people that probably are using like PR
Agents.
agents and stuff like that to kind of like promote them, submit their work in different places. Um there's also like disparities, right? Like if you are sponsored by an organization or like you are an organization, you can submit your stuff in places that individuals that don't have a lot of that support and are smaller and are doing a lot of that work can do that. Then they're not getting the nominations and they're not getting the awards, not because they're not good enough, but because they don't have the resources to even submit for these awards. Um, and that kind of like causes like it's not necessarily the person that is submitting or getting an agent's fault. It's not. It's just the ecosystem is not set up in a fair way that everyone gets that opportunity. Like it's not like if I get an award, it's necessarily because I am better than all these other people. It's just that a lot of these other people can't even submit or anything or don't have the energy to submit or
Or they don't have like the financial means to submit. So you have to like pay to play to get this recognition. I think like you and I have fell victim to this. I've like recall at least a multitude of like voice memos that I will like send to Ray of just like, ugh, I'm like so jealous or hating on this person because they got this award. But then you find out that like, oh, say for example, like if this content creator got accepted into like Forbes 30 under 30, it's like, oh, like you can self-nominate and also you can like pay to be a part of these things. And so it's just like that kind of I don't know, again, like I then I just kind of find myself like rolling my eyes of like, ugh, like okay then, you know.
yeah. Which to be fair, if I had the means and the money, I would 100% do the same thing.
Mhm,
I would
mhm.
100% if I had the means put myself for like I am not under 30 and if I were under 30. So again, like this is not a hate on people that do that. This is just how we feel when you see that and like I guess some of it is just because you feel a sense of relief because when you see all this like 30 under 30, 40 under 40, it's kind of like this judgment of like, oh my God, am I not good enough? Have I not done enough? And the moment you hear, like the moment I hear about like some of these things that like, oh, they had agents, they had people working with them, and they are doing like a lot of them like are doing amazing work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But once you see the amazing work and the means, and you're like, oh, so it might not be that I'm not good enough, it might just be that we are in different places with different means. And maybe some of them are like have different priorities and they were like, you know what? I have the same means as you do, but my priority and my strategizing is that I'm going to spend the same money that you might spend on something else on this because this is bringing me other opportunities. So it's not always that like, oh, they're like swimming in money and they made that decision. It's just that to me, like then I get a little bit of like a, oh, so it's okay. It's because like if I could have done that, I could have also been like Forbes like 30 under 30 or something, or 40 under 40, which is not necessarily true, but it's just like my way to
Mhm.
alleviate my own feelings. In that case though, I think what we are hearing is a different story. It's more about a perception of two things: a perception of authenticity and transparency, where you see this person, they're so vulnerable with their personal struggle and everything. And then suddenly, that perception of transparency and vulnerability becomes a little shaky because you realize, like, PR. is behind it,
Mhm.
and PR on its, like, own just feels inauthentic. Whether it is true or not, it's just, like, your visceral reaction. And the second part of it is like, yeah, as you said, like, when would you say, like, I'm doing science communication? Should there be a percentage division of like, oh, you have to do 50% talking about science and 50% personal, or 90% or 100%? What's that secret combination that is that? And I don't know, but I know that we react differently to it.
I guess, like, in the terms of personal journey, because it's like, okay, for me, for example, like, I shared my struggle of, like, failing through graduate school, and that's how I kinda gained a little bit of a following or, like, recognition or clout because I was able to share something that other people haven't have experienced, but a small portion have experienced. And then, yeah, like, how I navigated that, and so I found a lot of, like, other graduate students being like, "Oh my god, thank you for sharing, and, like, thank you for
Mhm,
destigmatizing, like, this was so important, like, like, how are you able to share that?" So I can see where, like, this science content creator is sharing a personal story that they're actively going through that can feel almost all-consuming, and then, like, pivot their science, like but they happen to be, like, a scientist, like, a scientist, and did frame themselves as, like, a science communicator, or not necessarily frame themselves as a science communicator, but yeah, again, like a woman in STEM
mhm,
that does this type of science. And so for me, it's just like, okay, well, like, I'm a science communicator in the sense I'm like studying science communication, but also on my own platform, I'm not talking about science. I talk about the people and I talk about like my own journey in what it means to be a science communicator and what is it like, what does science communication look like? And so, but I think going back to the prior point of where the submitter feels the ick or had the visceral reaction, it's just like, okay, well, if I'm talking about my personal struggle of failing, and then I'm going to talk about submitting myself into the science category, like, it doesn't feel like if we're going to talk about being authentic and transparent, like, it doesn't feel like the right fit. Like, maybe lifestyle or maybe, some other kind of category will fit. But if you're going to be entering in a category about science content, and you're competing, quote unquote, competing with other contenders who are like legit are talking about science and all their content that they're doing, it doesn't feel like the right fit and the right match. And so, yeah, I think like that's where the disconnect comes in.
right. This is
And
like
also like not everyone does super like sorry, one more thing. And like not everyone takes that extra level to see that there's a PR firm. Sometimes at least for me, I can like skim this is a friend or like if this is a friend or a person I've been following and supporting, I'm going to vote for them, I'm going to
right.
vote for them. But then, yeah, I guess I wonder how fine print was, like, the PR firm or, like, was it blatant? But also if there is a bio and then you're reading that, because of their personal struggle, this is what they're submitting into, then I think that's where also, like, the disconnect comes in.
Yeah. It reminds me of, when The Bear submitted for comedy, and every
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
like, "It's is it a comedy?"
No, literally, yeah, they're like, "It's a dramedy." It's like, yeah, there's humor to diffuse, but, like, it is not it's like, "Okay, are we gonna submit" yeah, it's like, "Are we gonna submit Severance to, like, the comedy bit?" Or it's an office comedy. It's like, "No,
Right,
it's not."
right, right. Yeah. Yeah, lots of different feelings. So one of the things that this brought up is, along the line of like a paper, you saw a social media post on, which
Mhm.
was like is like lying increases trust in science. That was the title of the paper. And as I was like reading, I think there's a lot of like connections between what we are experiencing here and what this paper was saying. So one of the things that it was talking about, and it was honestly a long paper, so like there's just like bits and pieces of it that like I kind of like did retention. I was gonna use it as a verb, like I retained. What's to retain? Oh
Retained.
my god! Again,
I
English is not my
retained.
first language, so it's okay. Retained. Obviously. um. So one of the things that I brought up was the difference between trust and trustworthiness, and how in a lot of science communication communities we say that science should become trustworthy. That's something that I say all the time in my trust workshops when I'm like, okay, These are the things that you could do to be perceived as trustworthy, right? But you should also actually be trustworthy. And we talk about transparency and empathy and integrity, and we go to the details and examples and stuff. And one of the things that the study says is like, well, if you're trustworthy, that doesn't necessarily help people trust you or science. So, for example, one thing that makes things really complicated is transparency. Let's say you come in and you talk about all of your conflicts of interest as science. That's one of the things that can like reduce people's trust if you have a lot of like weird conflicts of interest, right? Or when you talk about like positive science versus like bad news in science, right? That would be another thing that would get people like being like, oh, I don't know if I trust you or not. So, and then it talks about alternatives. It's like, well, one alternative is that you could lie, which
Mm.
one, it's ethically wrong. Two, when you lie,
I
like,
wonder if they're framing lying as like a white lie. Like, you know how when someone be like, "Do I look fat in this dress?" And you're like, "No, you look great." And it's like it's a lie. It's not the full truth, but you're like doing it to not to like soften it. So I wonder
mm,
if it's like if I'm not telling a lie, I'm just omitting the truth, you know?
it's interesting you brought that up because I was going to say something and ask you a question. I think the paper was like, yes, you could lie, and it could be like a lie, like, or like, I'm not gonna show you my information or cover stuff, which is gonna either make people more suspicious or the lie comes out, and then you're like, oh, I guess you were lying. I can't trust you anymore. But the other side of it is what the story that we just discussed is. What would happen if there's complete full transparency, right? Like if this person would have come and said like, here's this, I'm telling this struggle story, by the way, I also have this team that is packaging this, and I'm going to do that, and if I get this award, I'm going to get money for it. So in a way, by me sharing this, I'm going to make money. You know what I mean?
Mm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
like, what is, I also like, there's so many things that I don't want to share about like my processes and stuff. So what's that level of transparency that, like, we feel
Ugh,
comfortable with?
that's a good question. Cause one so as someone who's like always on TikTok, one thing that's been like grinding my gears is how like everything is an ad now. Like everyone is creating user generated content. But I find the comments to be different in two different types of content that I see. So, one, where this person shares a personal story to segue into, oh, I take this, once I started taking this vitamin, then I started like feeling better. I started doing this. And then you can see on TikTok, there's like the little orange cart to like purchase this thing. So when I open up the comments, they're like, ugh, like this is, you're obviously like selling, like this is like, is this even like, if you're trying to push this out, is even a true story? Is this story even real? Are you just like fabricating? Are you lying? Versus scrolling a couple more swipes. And then all of a sudden I see this person is just like, hey guys, I got diagnosed with cancer. I'm trying to make ends meet. I'm going to push this cart. You don't have to buy it. I'm going to push this product because if you engage with this content, stay here for like a minute longer just to help me get the view so then I can get paid by TikTok in order to fund my cancer.
Mhm.
People in the comments are like, girl, get your bag. Like, we're here for this. Like, oh, I'm going to comment to boost. I'm going to share. Like, there's people that are rallying in there because of this person's like, you can like this you can like this product, you not, but this is like what I'm going through and this is why I need your help.
Right.
So that like, so, but I wonder if that's different though, because like it's an actual product where this content creator is packaging themselves and seeking an award that would like open more doors. And then that also makes me think about now that we're like in this new wave of how science is being funded, if there's a lot of federal grants that are being cut and now we have to seek private investors or private companies, private foundations, private corporations, how does that murk up the water of like now like for instance, like this is like okay, this content creator was sponsored by Bill Gates to produce these series of YouTube channels. It's going to be received differently by two different sets of people where one, like those that are very much science aligned are going to be like, great, Bill Gates is investing in content creators that are really pushing the narrative forward versus like the people that are not that are like already think that Bill Gates is like implanting chips or changing the weather or like behind all this other stuff of just like, oh, Bill Gates is funneling money to brainwash us into doing this, this,
Mhm.
and this. And so, like, as a, the question from the submitter at the very end was just like, what does it take for us to be able to sustain ourselves as a career, as a science communicator on the internet? And we do have to kind of push or get funding from external sources in order to fund our things to talk about the science.
Right.
What is it? What, like, how do we align ourselves with the brands? How, like, we have to be transparent on social media if, like, if this was a paid ad or if this was a paid sponsor, if this was a partnership, like, that has to be disclosed.
Mm.
But yeah, like, how does that transparency then change based on like who is consuming it?
Right.
And now that everything is more privatized and more corporations, in order to fund science, like, how
Mhm.
is that further going to exacerbate?
Right. Because, like, I wonder with the creator in question, um, on one hand, if they would, like, show too much transparency, to be fair, like, most of their audience probably doesn't care or know about the things that this listener told us, right? And they're creating their content, they're trustworthy enough, I think. um they are like showing like actual vulnerability, like the content is real. So it's not like they're lying or anything. I think especially like talking about the specific struggle is very helpful for a lot of people that are like experiencing the same thing. So one side of it is that, and if they start bringing up those things, they probably might lose some of that trust. At the same time, maybe I love the 2 examples that you gave, because a big part of it is that how do you talk about it? So what if she would have said, "You know, I have the struggle. It also costs money, but I am doing these things because I also need to like make money to be able to like, work on this," or something like that. I wonder how the audience would have perceived that. And I don't know, like
Mm.
we're not saying that she should do that because like it could completely backfire, but based on like some of what you're telling me like about like the authenticity of like I need that money, right? This kind of connects with one of the actual conclusions of that paper. So one of the things the paper was like suggesting, other than like you could lie, but don't lie because all of that. So they were saying one of the problems is they believe that the public have a wrong perception of the scientific authority, like the fact that like, oh, science is so clean and it's not messy and is always right and it always has good news and is always certain and it always knows what's happening. So when something is just a little away from that, when you're being sponsored by someone or you don't have all the answers, then everything feels like a bad news. So maybe something that we need to do is to also kind of like figure out how we can change that perception about like what science actually is, right? That it's also uncertain, that it makes also mistakes, but also they talk about Kathleen Jameson, who she talks about we probably also need to show people what are the norms of science, that like, however scientists are ethical, these are the stuff they try to do, these are the things they want to get right. um and I wonder the equivalent of that for us would be like, if you want to show what real science is, for us it would be to show that science communication on social media is expensive and it costs money, but here's how we spend our time, here's how we spend our money, here's sometimes how we get sponsors, here's sometimes how we have to nominate ourselves, here's so the more people become familiar with these processes and understand that this is a norm, but it's not abusive and it's not wrong, and we're not lying to anyone, then maybe once they learn about it or hear about it, it might be less of a reaction, which also means maybe someone like her doesn't have to feel like she has to hide that, or doesn't have to feel like she needs to like submit to a different category, and can like very openly submit her content like into a life, like into maybe a category that seems like right. You know what I mean? It kind of like becomes this like loop of good decisions and good reactions.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to think. There's like multiple things that kind of popped into my head when you said
Mm,
that. I'm trying to like cipher through and process at the same time. This was also a conversation that I had for like a recent job interview where like this person was kind of like sharing their science communication ethos of just like we should be bringing people along into understanding the process of how it's done. So then when there are changes or there's new information, then it gives people the ability to change their minds and follow along because then they can see how we landed to this discussion. Where
Mhm.
like the why we see as something as like fact is not fact, but it's like the body of science and evidence have led to this main thing. Like we see it a lot in physics of like there's this new theory, but then like what if someone poses a different question, then and they start exploring that, then it can either shift like what that current theory is, or there's maybe competing theories, or eventually people will continue to dive through to see like where we're going to diverge or converge to. But then we can see how, because of the nature of science, where there's going to be different opinions, different ways that science is tested, different people that are testing the science, and our inherent biases and our personal flaws, because not everyone's going to follow ethics. Like capitalism profits are always going to skew what what gets funding to do science, or what questions we're going to pose, and which questions are going to be like isolated or pawned off, when there is a general curiosity, or maybe like not, or like not curiosity, but if there is something that goes against the status quo, some body of evidence can support one theory versus another. So how do we bring people along instead of it being like this like elitist of these like overlords of the academia that have to like give us what the final say is that we have to listen to,
Mhm.
versus like, okay, how has this become like a community effort, um a citizen effort of like people feel invested into wanting to understand themselves rather than just like getting upset
Right,
when it's so removed,
right,
and when the discourse does change, then we're like, you told us this thing and now it's another thing.
right,
So that's like one thought we can go
right.
there.
So I think as you were like getting to your point, you kind of answered one of my questions. No, it's because you start.
Once you like 30 years to get to your point, Stephanie, this made me believe,
No, it was good to hear your thought process because I think it answered one of my questions. So as you started explaining, right? In my head, I was like, oh, so if the solution is for to teach people in air quotations like the process of science or what science is or how does it work, right? There was a part of me that was like, oh, like is like how is that different on just relying on the deficit model of communication, which is we both know a lot of people know
if
it.
they only knew more.
Right, right,
Mhm.
right. For listeners, the deficit model of communication basically is this kind of like old fashioned zombie model that was like, oh, if people just have the information and we fill up this like the information deficit, then everyone's going to change behavior and attitude and going to do things like the best right way possible. Years of research and exploration, all of that, we realized like, oh, facts are not enough to change people's minds. There's a lot of like emotions, identities, a lot of other things involved. However, that doesn't make information and education irrelevant. It just means that it has to be a complementary thing. And I think the key word is, as you were talking, is how do you get people to be like walk along, build a relationship, right? And kind of like want to know more, like be interested, feel that this is important, right? So it's like a community effort. And I think that's the part that is about the relationship building aspect of it. And that's something that I thought like I wish the paper talked a little more about because it was like, oh yeah, so the solution is to like teach people like how things are. And I think it's like, yes, but it's also about like that relationship building where I get to like know you as a scientist and understand your work as a scientist and how it connects with me and how I might be doing science, how I could be a citizen scientist. How does that all look like? And it's affecting me and you and I could trust you as a human being so that then I can understand when don't have good news for me or you're not certain of certain things. It doesn't mean you're evil or you're trying to harm me. It's more just how this works.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think I feel like that's always a reoccurring theme in, like, every single episode that we've been talking
Yeah,
about, like, this
right, right,
just,
right.
like, the community aspect of it, like, how do we I feel like this can fall down other rabbit holes too in terms of, like, okay, who gets to consider themselves a scientist? Like,
Mhm,
everyone can be a scientist. Can everyone be a science communicator? Can everyone be an expert in this thing? Like,
mm,
who gets to do what, you know?
yeah,
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, it's just like, okay, like, how do we bridge these conversations so it's not just like us versus them or our
mhm,
word versus their word or our word versus their lived experiences. So like how do we use that to inform the general question that we're trying to answer?
right,
So it's a collective effort to understanding and it's a collective effort of curiosity and a collective effort to want to do good for our own people and ourselves that it ultimately changes policy to like reflect that.
right.
Um
Full
Mhm.
circling this to our social media person, or
Mhm.
the way we do this on social media to tell people how we exist and how we work and how we make money.
Yeah, because that's another thing too of just like my my soapbox that I'm always stepping on of just like science communication is not valued. So the fact that like a lot of the science communication efforts is people going out of their way because they see that there is a lack of understanding or this misrepresentation. Like everyone's taking their own initiative to like and their own energy and their own efforts to like talk about science on social media, but it is unpaid work. Unless you have a full-time job that supports you in order to create content, it is work. Like the amount of time and effort it goes into researching to uh researching to writing to filming to editing it to adding the graphics to uploading it to writing your captions. Like, I know there's like some eye rolling with like within the content creators, like outside of STEM, but just like in content creation in general. Just like there's people that are like, try being an influencer for a day. Like it's a really hard work. And it's like, it's not going to be the same level of hard work as like someone's working like a 9 to 5, like grinding their ass off. But at the same time, it is mental energy and it is time and it is unpaid time if you are not supported by an institution or an organization. And for science communicators, either they're science YouTubers or TikTokers or people that upload on Instagram, in order to produce like factual educational content, if it's done well,
Mhm,
takes time and effort. And that leads to, in order to support yourself for that time, then you need to seek sponsors, you need to seek ads, you need to be promoting, which can, and it depending on who you are, can either be aligned with your ethics or aligned with the community or not. Some people just do it for like the money. But I think, yeah, I guess coming back full circle to this content creator, one aspect that we talked about, I don't think we talked about on the podcast, but it's just kind of like even in like in my science communication research of just like how do we humanize scientists? Like how are scientists perceived? One of the things that we looked into was like how are scientists perceived based on like the story that they're sharing. Like if I'm just showing them as a subject matter expert, the words that were used to describe the scientists is like, oh, they seemed enthusiastic, they seemed passionate, they seemed um like they really care about the research that they're doing. But then when the second narrative that I showed was the same scientist, but they were sharing that like, yeah, like I didn't know what I wanted to be. I struggled to figure out like what exactly I wanted to do. And it wasn't until this person in my close to me in my life like experienced cancer that like led me to want to pursue cancer research and become a scientist and investigate how this worked, that the people that watched the video when were asked like how like tell me about your perception of the scientist, are like, oh my goodness, I related to the scientist because I also don't know what I want to do, or I
mhm,
really admire how they were vulnerable. I really like they were able to pull deeper meaning from how the scientist presented themselves because of like the narrative of them sharing more about themselves versus just like seen as a subject matter expert in talking about the research that they're
mhm,
doing. So for this content creator, as seen as like an expert in whatever field that they're in, but then they're like, oh, on a human level I am struggling because of this, this, and this. And I want other women to know that like they're not alone in this journey, even as like someone who is a scientist or a woman in STEM. And if they were going to share that like, hey, what I'm going through is really expensive. I want to raise a platform to not only like be able to like help sustain myself and like the work that I'm doing, but I also want to be like an advocate or start this other initiative. And it results in like me having to invest in a PR firm. I feel like that
Mhm.
would change like how someone would interact with the story, especially with this person that submitted the, I don't know if especially, but like if this person that submitted the story is going through a similar journey, like I wonder if that would have been like, well, hell yeah, then like I would vote for this person because we share a similar thing versus seeing that like if because it was kept a secret or kept a lie and this person is also the submitter also experienced something similar, they saw it as like, ugh, they saw it as gross. As just kind of
Right.
like, oh, you're exploiting your own struggle in order to get clout and recognition, which will also lead to like you making money off of this. Like, yeah, I guess it's yeah, I don't
Right.
know.
So yeah, it's more about like them concealing a truth, which is something that we all do all the time. Like I don't feel the need to tell everyone everything that I do in terms of like for example self-promotion, right?
Mhm.
There is especially because PR and self-promotion like in nature is seen so negatively.
Mhm.
So you're like, "Oh, so I," which is another struggle where you're like, "Oh, so I'm supposed to self-promote and get awards and get recognition, but also not self-promote and not put
Mhm.
resources in it and be humble about it. How
Mhm.
how do I how do I do this?" And then the next job that I wanna get, someone is gonna be like, "How many followers do you have?" Because
Yes.
that's how the next job comes in. So I think the ecosystem is just set up unfairly. And we are put in these unfair boxes where we have to get followers, make money, be authentic, not promote ourselves, not spend money. It's just, and it makes sense that we are reacting to all of it because all of it can exist at the same time and all of it can be true. And we can have a negative reaction while understanding why they did it or why they didn't do it. In an ideal world, I wish we all were compensated so well enough that we could just like not have to like do a lot of like different things that could give the perception of inauthenticity. At the same time, that is not gonna happen. I don't think this is the world we live on. I don't think we're just gonna like suddenly get insane funding for science communication and public engagement, whether it's like specifically teaching the science or showing how a scientist looks. So the only thing that is left is kind of figuring out what is the level of transparency and the thing that you want to say. How do you say it based on your audience? Because it's one of the things to also like, if you want to think strategically, is if that content creator's audience was the person that wrote the letter to us, that would have been very different, right? Because if that was our audience, I would have been like, hey, you and I, my audience are science communicators. What are your struggles? My struggle is this, but also, like, none of us are making like easy money. And here's the things that I'm doing. So for that audience, this might have worked. But that content creator is not really her audience. Her audience is um probably like mothers who have daughters who are interested in like women in STEM and stuff like that. And for them, that might be irrelevant information. And it
Mhm.
might be
Mhm.
information that they will never care about or get access to. So, and I'm not saying do it or don't. I'm just saying why disclose if
Mhm.
it's a shaky thing to disclose. Does that
Yeah,
make
yeah,
sense?
yeah.
I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying strategically,
Yeah, like it goes back to like what your paper like the paper was saying like a white lie, you know, like like we're not yeah, like we're omitting the truth for this for like the
right. And it's not a white
to
lie, it's
continue
deciding what to put out.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, not a white lie, just like omitting the
Right.
full truth and not being super like extremely transparent. Yeah, because then like does that mean like every single post that they have to do whenever they talk about their personal struggle is like this was supported by my PR firm, you know?
Right. Or like, yeah, or every time it's like
Uh,
vote for me, it's like it's also like, why would I say it?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like why would I say, by the way, I hired a PR firm to do that? Which
yeah.
again, the reaction to it makes sense.
Mhm,
At the same time, the disclosing of it might not make sense.
mhm, mhm,
And again,
mhm.
Steph, if I had the money, I will get that PR firm.
I will submit myself to 30 under 30 if
If I had
I guess, like, like, not reducing that because, like, you still like, even if you submit yourself, you still have to be, like, selected for, like,
oh,
so
we're
there is
extremely
still, like
accomplished. Right, right.
yeah, yeah. There's still competition, there's still validity to
Right.
that.
The people that we see, like, they're still, like, extremely
Yeah,
impressive people with insane accomplishment. So this is not us, like, diminishing that. I know we're like, "Oh, I could have done it." Realistically, I could have not. Like, I could have had
yeah,
10 PR from, I probably still wouldn't make it. So,
yeah,
like, great for everyone that did it. You did good. This is, again, us being pity and just, like, being like, yeah, it's
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We're complicating the narrative or whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, yeah. I guess it's hard to say. It's hard to say, like, what is the right thing for this content creator to do?
Right,
Was it to, like, submit in lifestyle versus, like, science
right,
content, you know?
right,
Because, like you're saying, like, it's not is it important based on who their audience is to disclose that they were a PR firm? Like, is that something that people like, I usually don't look at that, Like, but as someone who is in, like, the ecosystem of, like, we need ads and we need
mhm,
sponsorships in order to, like, sustain being a content creator. Um, and there are several laws that, like, do you have to, like, disclose that, but I guess that's different than, like, submitting for awards versus, like, pushing a product.
right. Plus, something that makes it unfair is that as humans on like these social media and stuff, people have different expectation than, let's say, this was a voice of an organization, right?
Mm, mhm.
Like, they don't have to disclose PR because they're not a person, right? So people don't feel like, oh my God, are you like lying to me? Or like, are you not being authentic? When I say an organization, I'm like, I probably don't even think about it. But as people, the standards are different, and that's like one of the difficult things with social media, that you're building relationship with people and expect their authenticity and all of that, but it's different with organizations.
Yeah. To the user that submitted this, I know you wanted this to be a discussion. I hope we didn't I hope you don't hate us for our discussion. I feel like, yeah, it's pretty messy.
I maybe it's more like a thank you for doing this, like you, we had reactions to it too, and I think what you were saying, you were not hating on her. I think you had a visceral reaction which we kind of shared, and I hope, like, the way we opened it up kind of reflects the complexity of why we have these reactions, where there is obviously like empathy and understanding for why people do what they do, but also understanding that, like, things have consequences. Like, anything that we do on social media causes a ripple effect of reactions. Some of it we can control, some of it we can't, but there definitely has to be more systematic changes in how science communication is funded, is presented, is talked about. And when we don't have a lot of those supportive systems, it makes things hard for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you have any juicy drama, submit it to us and we can talk about it. Drama at SciComm Hotline or just visit scicommhotline.com. But Ray, thank you for this discussion.
Thank you, bringing the drama.
My